Good afternoon again, everyone, and thanks again for having joined this Blue Cloud webinar today, Fish Matter of Scale. We are very happy to share some preliminary information and results from this Blue Cloud demonstrator. I would like to introduce a bit the agenda of the day. Next slide, please, and our speakers. I'm Francesca Spagnoli, and I'm the coordinator of the Blue Cloud project, together with my colleague Dick Schaap from Maris, who is the technical coordinator of the project, and I'm working for Trust-IT Services. The speakers of the webinar today will be quite a lot, very relevant speakers. We will start with a very brief introduction of the project led by me, and then we will give the floor to Anne-Elise Nieblas from FAO, who will give us some more information about the Demonstrator Vision and Mission. And then we will give the floor to Julien Barde from IRD that will discuss a little bit more on detail the Fisheries Atlas objectives and tasks, together with Emmanuel Blondel from FAO. We will be focusing on the Fisheries Atlas activities and tools. And then we will give the floor to Aureliano Gentile from FAO and Yannis Marketakis from FORT that will focus a little bit more on the global record of stocks and fisheries. And finally, we will open the floor for your questions and answers. So feel free to add the questions in the meantime if you have while the speakers are presenting in our chat, both or in the poll, in the question and answer, and we will take all them at the end. I just would like to tell you that, of course, this webinar is recorded, and we are going to share our presentation and video from the webinar on our website, bluecloud.org. So please feel free to have this link and to get more information from also previous webinars that we held in the past weeks, as the one on aquaculture. Next slide, please. I would like to briefly introduce you the project. Our nice project is a flagship thematic cloud cluster project with a focus to digitalize to introduce digitalization within the blue economy and to create an open web-based cyberspace where the marine researchers and innovators will come together to share data and advance the ocean knowledge to collective intelligence. So Blue Cloud basically aims to become the environment for the blue community to come together and to offer access to data, services, and tools through a multidisciplinary resources and added value services for the benefit of the marine research for the future blue economy landscape. Next slide, please. Our mission is indeed to piloting this cyber platform, bringing together both multidisciplinary data from observation, in situ and remote sensing that can be relevant for any kind of analysis for scientists in this sector, analytical tools, and some set of computing facilities as well, which combined and is essential to support researchers in better understanding the many aspects of ocean sustainability. Next slide, please. We are indeed developing a smart federation of existing data, computing, and storage resources through two main points, access points. So the data discovery and access service to facilitate the sharing of this information, and the Blue Cloud virtual research and analytical services provided by Blue Cloud. Next slide, please. Blue Cloud in the policy context. We want to raise some relevant points. Why Blue Cloud is relevant in this context. We have just released on Monday the open consultation on our roadmap, our strategy for 2030, in order to build, to support the sector in building open access to data, sharing data, and also within the context of the European Open Science Cloud and the Sustainable Development Goals and from the United Nations, as well as the European Green Deal and Digital Twin Ocean. So please help us to shape this context. If you're interested to learn more about the project, you have our information on the website, and also you can access the roadmap to the link on the presentation and give your voice to our project as well, and we will take it into account. Next slide, please. We have some early results that we have already produced, some set of relevant documents that you can access from the website if you're interested, for example, in the blue data infrastructure, and also to some technical requirements for our demonstrators. We will see now a little bit later which are our demonstrators, so you can get some more information. We have also some position papers and articles that have been just featured in some news that you can access, and you can get more information about the status and results of the project. Next slide, please. We have 5 real-life demonstrators. 2 of them are focusing on biodiversity, and we have another demonstrator focusing on marine environmental indicators, and 1 on fisheries and 1 on aquaculture. You can access, of course, this webinar on aquaculture we had the past weeks from our website, and today we are focusing on the fish, a matter of scale. Next slide. This is the agenda we just showed to you, and now I want to give the floor to Anne-Elise Nieblas from FAO, who will talk about the Demonstrator Vision and Mission. Thanks.
Hi, today our focus is going to be on the Fisheries Atlas demonstrator, which is managed by FAO, IRD, and FORTH. The ambition of this demonstrator is to deliver tools to manage, visualize, and analyze fisheries data via aggregate mapping, products, and statistics. This tool expands the analytical capabilities of previously developed tools in order to better understand fisheries effort and its contributions to food systems, as well as to better understand relationships between fisheries and, for example, the environment and biodiversity. The Fisheries Atlas is built on a robust, replicable, open and fair environment that supports databases, open and fair map viewers, semantic knowledge bases, and registries. Next slide, please. The Fisheries Atlas is incorporated into the D4Science platform via a virtual research environment, or VRE. This environment is a user-driven platform that encourages community involvement to collect, upload, and publish data. Oh, sorry, next one, thanks. As such, there is a major focus on the enhancement of data quality through standardization, but also use, review, and feedback. Next slide, please. The VREs are built in a data infrastructure that facilitates the gathering of disparate or separate and distributed data and bringing it into a common and standardized platform that can then be accessed by large and multidisciplinary communities. This data centralization and standardization then allows for cross-platform data integration and analysis, and it enhances data discovery, data access, and analyses that facilitate a fisheries science workflow. FAO's interest in the Fisheries Atlas then is to increase data access to all by simplifying and centralizing access to public fisheries data, and with the hopes that this will lead to a better understanding of the trends in global fisheries. Next slide, please. The data infrastructure hosts a wide variety of flexible integration tools, which are listed here, that support the standards and protocols that are required to build interoperable tools. It provides a high computational capabilities, and it enables the collaboration and sharing via a community interface. The infrastructure also provides tools that work towards the reusability, the reproducibility, and the repeatability of workflows. Next slide, please. So focusing on the Fisheries Atlas, this demonstrator, the goal of this demonstrator is to create an atlas that is available not for FAO, but for the global community, to provide access and visibility to geospatial fisheries data, to aid in a better understanding of fisheries globally. The goal is to support and inform Sustainable Development Goals 2, which is zero hunger, and 14, which is life below water. As I mentioned, the Atlas builds upon an existing service, the FAO and IRD Tuna Atlas, and it builds upon this Atlas by expanding it to include a wider range of stocks and data sets, and which enable it to do some cross-platform data integration and analysis. The goal is also finally to make it easier to use and more widely applicable to the community, the fisheries community. The Fisheries Atlas will be built in the context of the community, with the steps for its development being to identify available data, analytics, and indicators that are of interest to the community, and then to standardize these inputs in order to provide standard outputs. It's then to use these inputs and outputs to develop cross-disciplinary analyses and cross-platform visualizations to link fisheries with, for example, the environment or ecology, and then to distribute these statistics in order to improve broad-scale pattern recognitions in fisheries sector. This will be achieved by starting with the Tuna Atlas as a base, building upon it and expanding it, and finally continuing its integration into Blue Cloud. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anne-Elise. Now is the turn of Julien Barde.
Good afternoon. So my name is Julien Barde, and I'm going to present the objectives and tasks of the Fisheries Atlas. So next slide, please. The situation is that we've been, FAO and IRD, working on building a tuna atlas since more than 20 years. On this slide, on the left, you have like the snapshot of the cover of the old IRD Tuna Atlas that was made by a researcher working on a PC using GIS outputs. And on the right, you have now the current version of the new Tuna Atlas, which is made by using interactive dashboards and web mapping interface. It's clearly interactive. Data are open, and it's now hosted by a virtual research environment. So next slide, please. If we look at the situation, Tuna Atlas is actually a typical use case for fisheries data flows. So on the left, you have the 5 data providers that you need to be in touch with if you want to get all Tuna Atlas data worldwide. And to get this kind of plots or maps that we have on the right, to have this global overview, there is a workflow that is needed to make these 5 data sets to transform them in a way that is going to be served through a single global data set. So next slide, please. So objectives and tasks to succeed in building this Fisheries Atlas are the following. First, as Anne-Elise said, we want to build a generic tool that is going to be used for the Tuna Atlas in particular, but that can be used for any Fisheries Atlas. So the tuna fisheries use case is going to be the proof of concept that we use to say that we can do it for other fisheries. In particular, we are going to work with data cubes, multidimensional data, by focusing first on usual variables for fisheries, usual variables and dimensions, but as well usual indicators. This means catches, effort, but step by step, we are working on integrating new variables and indicators, and that are not only managed with data cubes. So for example, we aim at managing catch at size, tagging, biological data. We've been working already on AIS or VMS data, fish aggregating devices as well. And as Anne-Elise said before, one of the goals of the Tuna Atlas is as well the ability to display and manage some environmental parameters that will give some more context to the dynamics of fisheries, for example, to assess the impact of climate change. And as we are working on an atlas, of course, we need to visualize, we need to explore the data and indicators. So we need some maps, some web mapping interface, and we need some interactive dashboards and the possibility to link maps with dashboards. So on the bottom, you have like a small map of Madagascar where you can see some plots that are spatialized on the map. So that's the kind of product that we would like to have at the end. So next slide, please. So the second objective, and that is quite important for us since we were working on an infrastructure project, is to comply with the best practices for data management. This means in particular, make fisheries data fair. Another way to say it is that we want to offer a ready-to-go data management plan for fisheries. And since this community is working a lot with the R programming language, we decided to develop the workflow to manage the fisheries atlas by using the R programming language. And we want to follow as well an open and reproducible science approach. This means open data, open source codes, open formats, and so on. And the last objective is the fact that we use a VRE, so a virtual research environment that is provided by Blue Cloud, and that is in some way the manner to work with EOSC and the scientific cloud. So this VRE is going to be used to run the workflow and host the different applications that we use for the Tuna Atlas, for the Fisheries Atlas. So in particular, we need to deploy a spatial data infrastructure with different software components. We need to execute some R scripts by using multiple software like RStudio or Jupyter Notebooks or Data Miner that is specific to the D4Science infrastructure that we use. But also we need to host some visualization tools for the Atlas, as I said, some web mapping interface, some interactive dashboards like Shiny Apps and so on. So next slide, please. So the global overview of the workflow is the following. On the left, you have the 5 data providers for Tuna fisheries. It might be some different providers depending on other fisheries, but the issue is always the same. We need to collate this data set from different providers. We need to harmonize them. And by harmonization, we get like a single data set that we can store in a spatial data infrastructure. In this case, it's stored directly in a SQL database. And once done, we can build the data services, the fair data services that are going to make the data or metadata available through different software that are targeting different kind of users. Next slide. So the compliance with FAIR principles in detail. So as most of you know already, FAIR is about making data findable. So which means basically providing the discovery metadata that are going to foster the discovery by making metadata available through different search engines. Accessible, this means that we need to use data formats and access protocols that are relevant for the different communities. Interoperability, of course, this is done by implementing some standards that ensure that multiple software or human agents are going to be able to use the data. And reusability, it's more about like rich metadata, usage metadata that explain exactly how you can use the data. And as well by making this this data served in a way that that is using open data formats, for example. So next slide, please. So making data findable, few details. This is about using syntactic interoperability. So this means basically that we implement metadata standards that come from different domains. So for example, the spatial data for spatial standards for spatial data, for example, like ISO 19115 or cross-domain standards like DataCite or Dublin Core. So there is a lot of effort to manage the mapping between metadata standards, to assign DOIs as well. There is an ongoing effort as well to manage semantic interoperability. So instead of using only free text to fill some keywords, metadata element, for example, we want to use some controlled vocabularies. And this being done, you can be sure that your metadata will be exposed or harvested by different catalogs, so the catalogs of projects, but as well some global search engines like DataCite search or Google dataset search, for example. Next slide, please. Accessibility of data. So first, there is a lot of effort to enable users to explore and browse the data sets before accessing them. So this is going to be done by a web mapping interface or an interactive dashboard where you can display or filter the data. And once you're okay with the data you want to download, you can use some usual data formats and related protocols to access the data. So it can be simple HTTP link with widely used formats like CSV. It can also be some programmatic access with standardized protocols that are, for example, the one of OGC standards like WFS or the WCS, etc. Next slide. So about interoperability, just a few words. So this is clearly the key issue in such projects. And we target different standards, so cross-domain standards like Dublin Core DataSite for DOIs, for example, but some standards as well for spatial data, so the OGC standards that are the standards used or recommended for Inspire European Directive, for example. But as well some more specific standards like CWP for fisheries data, and some ongoing work to translate as well the metadata and data into ecological or biodiversity standards, for example, the TADWIC standards like EML or Darwin Core, but you have also some other standards like SDMX for statistics. Next slide. So reusability, that's my last slide. It's very important to be sure that data can be reused once accessed, once downloaded and properly cited. And this is going to be managed by providing rich usage metadata that explain how you can really make use of the data. So this means we describe the data structure with a data dictionary. We describe the quality, the provenance, and one goal would be as well to ultimately write data papers that are going to describe the different data sets. DOIs are here to foster data citation and long-term use, describing as well the licensing issues. And finally, I just want to say that the open science approach is implemented because our workflow that we use is available on GitHub. And this means that data can be checked, they can be replicated, and that finally the provenance of Tuna Atlas data is crystal clear. So, but the good point as well is that if you want to change the way it's done, you can customize our workflow, tune the parameterization of the scripts, and get some other data sets that might better fit your needs. And now Emmanuel is going to present you the activities and tools of this workflow. Thanks.
Thank you, Julien. So I'm going to present you a bit more details about the activities and the tools. So next slide, please. So first of all, we are going to work on the Fisheries Atlas, which intends to be operational. So one of them is the Tuna Atlas. So there are already some operational atlas released for that. So the challenge is that we try to gather multiple data sources. First, obviously, fisheries data sets from different sources, but also other relevant data, if available and available according to standards, to fair principles. So some of them already mentioned by Julien Barde are vessel trajectories or biological data. The difficulty is that they are handled and maintained by different institutions in an heterogeneous way. So we have different data structures, we have different formats, different ways to store the data. It can be shapefile, it can be a database, and we also have different locations. Next slide, please. So all this, in order to make it work together, we need to set up, before talking of tools, we need to set up a common methodology. And to build a common methodology, the best way is to harmonize the way we share the data based on international standards for metadata interoperability. For that, we keep strong coherence with what has been done and what is still done at European level, like the Inspire directive. Obviously, since this is a methodology based on standards, it intends to be cross-domain, so going beyond actually the fisheries atlas. I mentioned environmental data and biological data. These are not strictly fisheries related, but they can be enabled in the same way as we do for fisheries. So behind that, there is a clear, there are clear objectives that and principle that we cannot implement the FAIR principles for this fisheries data without applying well-known internationally recognized standards like ISO or OGC for the special domain. And there is no real sustainability if we don't use standards. So our first objective is not to build tools for atlases, but it's to build a methodology, and then the technology followed. By essence, the technology become obsolete with time. So, but the methods that we implement will continue. The data access should be metadata driven. So this is very important. So when you have some data set enabled on the atlas, all the information related to this data, including the data resources, so the data set comes through its metadata. So this is where we need to strictly rely on the FAIR principles. And once the data is found on the web, on the atlas, then you can access it, you can use it in interoperable ways. So this is where we consider that the standards are a cornerstone for the for setting atlas, and this is an element to feed data management plan and visions for the EOS, European Open Science Club. All this is backed up by strategical objectives in the Blue Cloud. So we use the common metadata models already mentioned by Julien Barde. And behind we have OGC services for metadata and for data services, considering that most of our data are specialized. So the standards from the Open Geospatial Consortiums have an important role to play. Yeah. Next slide. So we have, behind these principles, we also have challenges and constraints. So to exploit existing data flows, we need to have data that it is the most fair as possible. When it's not the case, then we try to exploit sometimes data samples, and we try to verify them. So to enable metadata and data services that are close to be FAIR compliant. And obviously we can mention the different constraints that we have, since we have different institutions, different origin and locations where the data is. We have IT constraints essentially related to the web browsing constraints, like cross origin and protocol security issues. Typically, this is what can prevent the atlas from displaying and accessing data from a remote source and remote server. Sometimes it's a backup or not. It depends on the institutional constraints and accounting requirements that constrain the institutions not to open the data to be usable by the atlas. In general, there is sometimes a lack of consideration of the importance of standards, and the tools, building tools, prevails on standard and application of a methodology based on the standards. Next slide. So for that, we have two kinds of tools. I'm going to present you two different tools, one for workflow and one for explorations. Both are open source software projects. So one tool is for automating and how to enable data flow as a services. So basically, I have a data set and I want to enable metadata and data services on top of that. So this is a tool that feed the atlas. And then we have exploration tools based on GIS map viewer and the dashboard facility to make this exploited on the atlas. So next slide. The first tool, so for the workflow part, is as said by my colleague Julien Barde, is based on R. So because you believe that R is a programming language that has a large community, especially in the scientific field. So the choice of R is not arbitrary, is really to target a large community, especially in the fisheries data science. So it's one R package which is available on GitHub. And the aim of that is to automate and orchestrate different type of action we want to do based on data sets. So basically we want to save as much as possible the data manager time and avoid wet forms. Obviously, we increase the reproducibility because everything is automated. We also simplify the use of standards. We are very aware that ISO and OGC standards in particular are very complex. So the aim of this tool is to simplify and to hide as much as possible this complexity. And we multiply the dissemination endpoints, which means that for this package, you centralized the place where you are maintaining the dataset description, so the metadata, but you can then enable a series of endpoints based on the same source. This tool is extendable, so you can plug in your metadata data source depending on how it is stored, if it is a database or a basic Google spreadsheet. And then you can plug different actions that can be specific to your domain. This can be processing or whatever. In our case, we have a series of actions that are predefined that do common tasks like creating ISO GC metadata descriptions, push it on the atlas, and also enabling data services. So how can I expose my data to standard data protocols? Once all this done, then it can be easily accessed in interoperable ways because we are using standards and reduced. So we have built some web map viewer, which is called OpenFair Viewer, also available on GitHub. And this is completely metadata driven. So basically, the only thing that the viewer understands is an endpoint to a standard catalog. And from that is capable to fetch all the metadata from datasets, then access to business descriptions from the datasets, like the temporal coverage, for example, or the geographic coverage, and also metadata about the structure. So how it is, how my dataset is structured, how can I query it? From that, the viewer is fully interoperable based on OGC standards. So we have so far the CSW, WMS, and WFS open standards. The WCS is in gray here because it's in plan. For the visualization, we have three kinds of components. We have maps, dynamic maps, tables, and dashboards. The dashboard parts is part of the scalability of the OpenFair Viewer and allows to plug in particular dashboards like our Shiny applications. And at the end, we have a possibility to reuse the data, so we can share, export the data. We find, again, obviously the different standard protocols, and we have export as a CSV, but also as R scripts for reusability and reproducibility by the users. Next slide. So this is a schematic view on a typical workflow that we do in GeoFlow. So basically on the right, we have all the information that we use as input. So we have contacts because in general, you want to give information on who is maintaining the data, who is the owner, who is the publisher, who is the responsible for the maintaining the data resources. We have obviously the description of the data sets, the data resources associated to it, and registers which encompass the reference data and control vocabularies associated to this data. On the middle is all what GeoFlow is automating. So you can configure a set of tasks, and for each of the data sets, it will automate it. all of this. So creation of metadata, publication on the web, data upload, data publication on the web, and also other tasks like DOI reservation on, for example, Zenodo. It is not specific to spatials, but we also have this kind of task done together with the data publication. So on the right, you have the targets endpoints that we have for this. We want to push the metadata on the catalog. Here, in that case, we use GeoNetwork essentially. We want to enable data services, special data services on GeoServer, and we want to assign a DOI on the Zenodo infrastructure. So all this is automated. So you can have series of data sets described in one table, and all these data sets will follow the same workflow. At the end, so next slide, at the end, all the resources that are available in the catalogs, the standard catalogs, are exploitable directly by tools like OpenFabrier that comply with standards. So you see the first point is that the CSW OGC protocols is what OpenFabrier is exploiting. So basically all is metadata driven, either 19115 for the business metadata or 19110 for the structural metadata. And from that, OpenFabrier just follows the standard resources and is capable to browse datasets, query datasets, and map them. Then all the other facilities like data tables and dashboards also exploit OGC data services. Then on the right, you see the different sharing facilities. So OpenFabrier bring you the facility to share what you are currently seeing and querying on the map through a single URL. So you are capable to share the data to users, or even to mention it in a publication and report, and you can export the data. Next slide, please. So here it's one view screenshot of the application. So next slide. You can see we have a panel to find the data. So this is equivalent to the find principle, the FAIR principle. So you browse the data and you look for some data sets. Next slide. From a data set, we have access to the structural metadata. So OpenFabrier is capable to interpret automatically these standard data structure definitions. So it's a complex one. We have a multi-dimensional data cube with several dimensions. We can do some query, browse it on the map, and then we have access, next slide. We have access to tabular data, so you can browse the actual data and visualize it on the table, and you can interact with the map. Next slide. So here, this is just to show you that this is the same method and the same logic is applied to configure, to contextualize the atlas. So we have the firm's Tuna atlas on top left. Then we also have the global record of stock and fisheries that will be presented next by Aureliano Gentile. And on the left, bottom left side, we have an example where you can see we can plug our Shiny apps on top of the application. So basically here we configure our Shiny app to act as a pop-up on the map. So you can browse the data directly through the map. And on the right, the bottom right, we have an example of other kind of data, which is a finer resolution data. And so next slide. Okay, and next it's Aureliano Gentile.
Good day, everybody. This is Aureliano Gentile, FAO Fisheries Division. I'm going to describe you briefly the other component of this demonstrator, the GRSF, the Global Record of Stocks and Fisheries. Basically, it is a database of stocks and fisheries which have been inventoried at global level with the added value of standard unique identifiers. This knowledge base, let me start introducing this term, has been built upon three main sources of information: the FAO Fisheries and Resources Monitoring System, the Fish Source, and the RAM Legacy Stock Assessment Database. This tool is envisaged to support the two main business cases, I would say: the SDG 14.4.1, which is the proportion of fish stocks within biological sustainable levels, and a tool to support traceability in eco-labeling schemes connecting seafood industries and consumers to the status of stocks and fisheries. So on one side, we would like to support the stocks status, indications and descriptors. On the other side, where these stocks are going through the market. Please. It's an aggregator of global knowledge for three top institutes, as I just said. Data integration is for the construction of such semantic knowledge base. We say database, but it's a graph base. Publicly accessible with global unique identifiers, and ready today to be extended with external resources like information from food data or oceanographic data and so on. We are reusing many components from parallel tasks, and with the advantage of exploiting Blue Cloud, we enable reusable, interoperable, and scalable data sharing. Please. Okay, this is a screenshot of the GRSF poster we produced when we launched the GRSF in FAO symposium last November, and a year ago almost. And from top left, you see an example of a stock broken down in different assessment units, and to which of it we assign a unique identifier, a QR code. And then towards the right, you see that this logic can be applied in support of status of stocks or for traceability schemes. So from when the resource is taken out of the sea up to the retail or to your plate. On the bottom left, you find a few logos of the powering infrastructures, the GRSF. Please. This is an interface anticipated by my colleague Emmanuel. We call it the GRSF map viewer. Place marks in blue or purple are representing stocks and fisheries. You can click on it, click, and you have some identity of the stock with the unique identifier, which is actually two semantic identifiers made of a combination of standards, identifying the species and the area. For fisheries, also the gear type or the competence authority and so on. And the URL, which is really unique with this unique identifier. You click on it, yes, and you can have more information in a detailed web page with also the data accompanying this stock or fishery. Please, next slide. Within the Blue Cloud, we have activated another VRE, we call it GRSF Pre, where we're using for testing, staging new data and software, and also for the enrichment of records with additional data from Blue Cloud, as I said, food data or other demonstrators. And to this, we are also producing competency queries and APIs. Several are already available, and others are in progress. Next. This slide mainly summarizes the great work our colleague from Fort Institute from Greece are doing. Basically, the GRSF is backboned by what we call the GRSF knowledge base. It's a semantic warehouse built on top of level ontology marine TLO, and semantically integrates data from the three main sources. So the Blue Cloud the services will interconnect the GRSF with information from the external infrastructure. So from the left, the sources are merged and fed into the Blue Cloud. On the right, you have a few logos, just to summarize the idea that from there we can take other data and all of them collated and enriched within the Blue Cloud infrastructure. And next slide, which is also the last one, is just an invitation to go there, this URL, and you can browse, register yourself and browse the data catalog, which is going to be newly refreshed in the next week or two. We will have a new data from the sources, so will be really well updated. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks a lot, Aureliano, and all the speakers for this very great presentation. We have seen a lot of nice things we are doing in terms of alignment with the standards as well. And I think it's really important and nice because today is World Standards Day. So that's really good. Now I would like to leave the floor for Anton Ellenbroek from FAO for the last part of the conclusions, and then for the opening the floor for the question and answers. Thanks.
There's one more slide. No, I think something went wrong. Yes, this one. So a lot of slides, a lot of very compact and comprehensive presentation. So this, for us, it's really a fantastic experience to work in Blue Cloud and with the underlying infrastructures to build this fairy tale. And let's hope we will live long ever after, as you say, at the end of a fairy tale. But for people who have questions, maybe this is just 10 minutes left to take a few questions from participants.
Yes, we had some questions. One question to FAO: are all the data listed be available openly in the Blue Cloud just for demo, or on a possible long-term basis so that we can build information on it?
As for FAO, all data we produce and publish are by definition open data, so they should be available for free for everybody to do whatever they like, except making money without giving a proper attribution. For other data that we use in this system, we cannot guarantee that it will always be available through FAO because Blue Cloud is a project at the moment, and unless we have a vision on long-term sustainability and support, we cannot speak for data from other organizations or the availability of the tools in the long term in an infrastructure. So we try to use as many, the FAIR approach also to help us build open tools and open data services that can be reapplied and can not only live in this context, but we also try to offer this as support to other projects, other communities, so that they can benefit from what has been developed in Europe, and then either in an EU infrastructure, or if that is not possible, also outside of the context of a EU infrastructure. That is why we really try to stampede around and emphasis standards, standards, and standards.
Thanks a lot, Anton. Another question: for the Tuna Atlas, you mentioned the manual step to collate the data. How does that fit with the R workflow?
Maybe it's a good question, maybe for Emmanuel to answer, or for Julien.
Well, on that, the manual collection is was one of the main constraint that we had in the Tuna Atlas, and now we are setting up a data call. So basically, at a certain period of the year, each year, the 5 tuna regional fisheries management organizations that manage the tuna data are going to put their data into a common workspace, and the R workflow is orchestrated from this R workspace. So the manual, actually, the manual collations is removed from the Tuna Atlas.
Thanks a lot. Another perhaps related question is, are the data vessel effort available for Tuna Atlas?
Sorry, what was can you repeat?
Are the data vessel effort available for Tuna Atlas?
There is, but it's a question for Julien, maybe.
Yes,
So
please.
efforts are not available on the current atlas, but that's the plan. First, we work on catches, then efforts, and then catch at size, and maybe, as we said, some other variables like tagging data or biological samples. But yes, effort is the next variable to be made available, but is not available for now.
Thanks a lot. Another question is, which platforms do you use to collect the data? I think perhaps, yeah. Perhaps Lino can help on this question, as he is also joining us.
Maybe platform in this case is a bit confusing, at least for me. So FAO does these. Every year we receive catch data, and also through IRD we have additional information, but it is not really a platform. It's more through an organization. It can come in many formats. What we do in Blue Cloud is use Blue Cloud technologies to convert this and to bring this into data sets that are managed through the Blue Cloud. So the platform there is definitely will be Blue Cloud in the future. For instance, in the deep science infrastructure, we use a lot of the data miner for the harmonization and standardization, and also for the further massaging of data. So if you say what platform do you use to manage it, it's definitely the Blue Cloud platform.
Yeah. Thanks, Anton. Let's see if there are any more questions. I think there was a question, an initial question from Dick, that was related to perhaps the presentation of Julien Barde. He was asking if this apply for the input data or also for the resulting data products. I think he was referring to the fair data principles, but perhaps we can give Dick the possibility to ask the question directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was indeed, say, Julien gave a very good explanation about using standards and how to make, say, the whole flow more fair. And of course, we have, let's say, one part is that the input. So you have to collate all the data and make it more homogeneous, and that to make that fair and available. But also, let's say, then the resulting, because you have the workflow, and after the workflow, you get results, which we can call products. And I was wondering if these principles are fully applied, let's say, through the whole chain, so you can really do reproducibility, and also both for the products as well as for using the data itself in a fair way.
So the question is about, like, if my understanding is that you ask if the FAIR principles are applied to all steps, including the inputs. So inputs, that would be a goal to, in some way, convince people to comply with standards, so that when they provide the data, we have like an automated way to integrate data. We don't have to deal anymore with some ad hoc specific scripts to transform their specific data structure into a standardized one. So for fisheries, I think this discussion is related to CWP standards, but this is driven by FAO. And yes, for all the steps of the workflow, we try to describe what processes are applied to build the different data sets, and we keep tracks of these steps in the provenance metadata. So we described all the processes that have been applied to build a data set from the RFMO to the global product, if this is your question, Nick, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. That was the question, and thanks for your answer. Very positive.
Thanks.
Okay, I also noticed a question on the chat of David Mills. They noticed that some presenters mentioned that other non-fisheries data could be incorporated. And if our intention is to implement an ecosystem approach. Yes, we have 5 demonstrators, and the idea really is to make these accessible from one demonstrator to the other. And that is also, I think, why we are so strong on standards and bringing data in an infrastructure that can manage a data from a lot of different formats and standards. That is really I think the Blue Cloud approach. And as for the ecosystem approach, if you would like to test one of your algorithms or analyses, I think we have some space for experiments with data if they really contribute to what the vision of Blue Cloud is. So we welcome suggestions.
Thanks a lot, Anton. Any other final question before we are closing the meeting? If not, I would like to thank a lot all the speakers for joining us today with this very relevant presentation. As said in the beginning of the webinar, all the slides and video recording will be available on our website. So please feel free to come and learn more about our project and all the other 5 demonstrators that we have. We're going to run other webinars in the very next future. We have on webinar on the 4th of December on the demonstrator focus on the environmental indicators. Registration will open soon, and I hope to see you all there. Thanks again to all the speakers, and have a nice afternoon. Bye.
And do not forget to fill in the consultation.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for the reminder, Dick. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.